Welcome back to another episode of the Freight Pod. I'm your host, Andrew Silver, joined today by a very special guest, per usual, always a special guest. Today's particularly special. We get to dabble in a part of the logistics industry that I have not yet interviewed, I should say, and certainly have not had any of my own personal experience. So I'm excited to kind of learn something new today. I'm joined by Mr. Bill Catania, CEO of OneRail, founder of multiple businesses, and we're going to learn about his journey and OneRail and all they're building. Welcome to the show today.
I really appreciate you having me. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So where should we start? I think, I know you've been in the freight industry for a bit now, but your background is not freight, right?
If I spend 30 years in this industry, I'm still going to feel like the new guy. So no, I had no background in it whatsoever. Just a customer problem I was trying to solve.
But this is also not the first business you've started, correct?
No, it's the third. I've had three. When I was in college, I started one and ran that for a few years, then started another one, and then shortly after started this one. So it's been three tech startups in 25 years. It's crazy.
What's the pull there? Like why are you an entrepreneur? Why are you a founder? What's the drive behind wanting to start multiple businesses?
I think it's, if I had to distill it down to one thing, it's the competitiveness of it. And the competitiveness isn't always financial. It's conquering an industry. It's changing things. I call it the look back. You make a bunch of progress, step back, take a look at it. And then, believe it or not, I get a lot of happiness from my last startup when I see that technology in the field, in a retail store. It was a digital coupon platform. To see customers interact with it, I get a tremendous amount of fulfillment out of that. So yeah, there's financial benefits. I like being in control of my own destiny, probably like yourself and other entrepreneurs. And I just want to keep doing that. It's never become bored for me.
I like that idea of the look back. It reminds me of kind of thoughts I had throughout my journey where it was like, I want to be able to, like, 20 years from now, I guess, look back and see that, like, there was something real, tangible created here. And for me, it wasn't products because it was more service and people. And so, like, the impact was more there, but it's got to be cool. You mentioned a retail product you built. It's like actually to go to the store and see something you created being used and adding value in society.
Yeah, I enjoy that. I enjoy that more than you know. And it's cool, and to watch, to interact with a cashier, right. And ask them questions. And I have the answers to those questions, but I want to hear what they have to say about it. Are customers using it? Is it, does it work or not? And not have any responsibility whether it is working or not. So it is kind of it's nice to see the legacy of that continue. And I'm sure OneRail will be the same, when that day comes where I'm not driving it, hopefully building a company here that'll grow far beyond my career, and would love to have that look back someday with OneRail.
Yeah, I'm sure. So what was the first business you built? Race car fans? Or tell me a little bit about this.
Yeah, so I was at Cornell. I had this really good job lined up with Philip Morris. I was going to go sell tobacco. And I thought that was a really good thing. It was a top decile salary because it's such a tough industry. And at the time, the industry was going through the master settlement agreement, which was like a $200 billion lawsuit. So you can imagine how difficult it was for Philip Morris to recruit students to, make that their first job. So I had this territory lined up. The section director called me one day and he said, "Hey, big boy, I've got news for you." And I was still in college. I still had like a month before graduation. He said, "You're getting a raise before you even start or increasing." I said, "I've got bad news for you. I actually got an investor and I'm starting my own company." And, passion project turned career. I grew up in a racing family. So my grandfather, Marion, started fielding race cars up in Western New York in the 60s. And then my dad started racing in 70s. And then I started racing when I was 17 back in 1993. So I've raced my whole life. So when I had an opportunity to find an investor, I had a pretty cool idea and he got behind me. I didn't care what the risk was. I just wanted to go head first and work on something that didn't feel like a job every day. And that might also be part of the answer to the question why an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So I'm curious if there's a connection between, or if you can draw a connection between racing and building a business. Like, are there any from the experience you had as a driver?
Yeah,
Like, yeah, talk a little bit about that.
yeah, for sure. Um, I would say most of what I have learned working around and actually building cars. So when I was 17, I built my first race car. Um, has really conditioned me for this, and I can give you a few points on that. Frugality, and being efficient. It's an expensive sport. It doesn't matter what level you're at, and you have to be frugal. You have to be innovative. Um, my dad was very innovative, and he did a lot without a lot of resources, and that sort of conditioned me a little bit. And then the failure. Racing is a failure sport. If you think about football, there's a winner and a loser, right? And most sports, it's a winner and a loser. With racing, there's one winner and 39 losers. So you better damn well get used to losing but then coming back and not stopping. Try as soon as you end that race and you're on the way home and you're towing the race car home, you start thinking, what do I got to do, for that not to happen again? How do I fix it? And then the teamwork side of it, you got to have great people around you. And with racing, nobody's getting paid, at least at the level I was racing at that time. I did race professionally in the ARCA series eventually. That's a whole different story. But when I was growing up racing, it was all volunteer help. You had to have people around you that were fulfilled to want to help you. You had to be a good person, or they'd tell you to pound salt, right? So it's a tough sport. And the fourth thing I would say is the endurance, persistence of you work a day job and then you go to work on the race car from 6 to midnight every single night. When I early in my career, I'd race 40 or 50 races a year, and that was all I did outside of my day job. There was no going to weddings. There was no nothing. It was racing and working. It was two modes.
So I love those kind of parallels you're drawing in the lessons, because like you absolutely were conditioned to build businesses based on that experience. I mean, just the idea of the frugality that's required for building a business, and especially a startup, the get knocked down, losing 39 out of 40 people are losing every week, every race, but you just
Yeah.
have to keep getting back up. And the second you're on the way home thinking, okay, how do I get better? Like, that is building a business. It's you walk in and what is the problem you've got today?
Yeah.
No one else is getting in the car for you tomorrow to drive. It's you. So you got to figure out, how do we tackle this problem and then get back up and go assess the next problem.
Hmm.
Just all of those parallels, I really appreciate that. Those are great. So just to stick on the racing for another minute here, you mentioned the arc. Like, what was the dream? Like, you wanted to be the next Dale Earnhardt, or like talk like, what were you trying to accomplish? Was it just for fun, or you really felt like maybe this could be a career?
At one point, it was my desired career. And when I was still in college, before I started my business, I actually secured a sponsor to race professionally when I was 22 years old. And they were going public, and it was a little sketchy. It was on pink sheets, and they ended up not raising the capital. So I was in a tough spot because I'd made some commitments. That's what I was going to do, and it was January of my senior year, and it was at that point that I realized, okay, I better get close to Philip Morris because they were recruiting me really heavily. But then just got lucky, found somebody that was looking to deploy some capital, in central New York of all places, and I was there and hit it off with them, and it worked out. But yeah, racing started as a hobby, but I don't know, whatever I do, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. I want to get to the highest level of it. And I still haven't done that in racing. I was fortunate enough to get to the ARCA series. My dream was to race at Daytona. If I could distill like one thing, if I wanted to race at Daytona, and I got to do that when I was 39, back in 2015, I ran the ARCA 200, and that was a dream come true. and every year I didn't do it. I thought, damn, I gotta work harder. I've got to, but I'm so busy with what I do during the day. How do I do it? And anyway, I was very fortunate to race a couple years in ARCA and have my own team. It was self-funded, and I'm not done with racing. I still race regionally. And someday I'll probably, that's a nice thing about racing. As long as you can, get your body through that hole and get in the car, which has no space whatsoever in it, you can do it as long as you meet the certain physical requirements.
So I was going to ask that. There's no age kind of. It's not like other sports where your body kind of breaks down. You're in your 20s, you're at your peak. In your 30s, you're still there, but starting to trend down. And by your 40s, you're pretty much out of the league. Like racing, it's not like that, huh? Like talk a little bit about what. One, just elaborate on that piece a little bit. I'm also curious, like, what does make a great driver? Like, what differentiates the winner from the guy behind him and the guy 30 spaces behind him? Because
Yeah.
it's not as simple as just driving a car, right? I mean, it is driving a car, but talk a little bit more about the skill of it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I can make some parallels that you'll certainly relate to, from your entrepreneurial successes. So, as a racer, you could race till you're 100, right? If you can do the job, and it is a very very physical sport. Anybody that doesn't believe that needs to strap in 140 degrees and do the same thing over and over for an hour and a half or 2 hours. I lose 10 to 15 pounds when I race, and
Each
it's
race.
very Oh yeah, you'll lose 10, 15 pounds in a longer, like 200 lap race. Yeah, it's pretty demanding, and you have G's on you the whole time. It's very physical, but at the end of the day, you become conditioned to that. And somebody that doesn't race would really struggle to get in, and the G forces would wear them out. You got to have really good core. Um, but what's real important? I mean, the most important thing, and again, drawing parallels, consistency and being very technical around your entry point, into a corner, when you're going to brake, when you're going to gas, right down to memorizing little things like cracks in the racetrack. And if you put your wheel on it, it'll actually turn the car a little bit, if the car's not turning right. And you just memorize a shadow of a tree, can change during the course of a race, but you learn to look for all those things. And it's memory. And it's, I made, this is a true, I'm not joking. Like, autism is a good trait for racing because you're maniacal about process and doing the same thing over and over again. And it's a great trait. I've known some really great autistic racers because that's a superpower. And when you see, like, football, you got steroids, right? You have performance enhancing drugs. In racing, it's like Ritalin. Ritalin is a performance enhancing drug. Drivers have been banned because they had traces of Ritalin and Concerta or
Adderall,
whatever.
yeah.
Name the flavor. Yeah, Adderall. Yeah, that's the most common one. So yeah, and so consistency though is everything, and then making those little adjustments, every lap, and figuring out how you can get another tenth, hundredth of a second. That's kind of the margins you're playing in. You're not playing in seconds. You're playing in hundredths and thousandths and tenths.
What is your wife's take on the safety or the risk of this endeavor that you've fallen in love with?
Yeah, I think she compartmentalizes it and doesn't think about it, to be totally honest. Now, I haven't done what I consider, the more dangerous racing, which is on the super speedways. Like, I've raced at Chicago, Pocono, a lot of the big tracks where you're going 190, 200 miles an hour. I'm doing mostly half mile ovals. They're pretty tame compared to what can happen on some of those really big tracks. But, she supports it just like anything. She knows it makes me happy. And the amount of money that I invest in safety is more than my first race car. My seat, my helmet, my head and neck restraint. There's been no driver fatalities that I'm aware of in stock cars with head and neck restraints. And that's 25 years since they mandated them. So, there's always risk. There's risk to anything. But at the end of the day, she knows it makes me happy. And I also keep it in check. I'm doing it like you golf now, right? I'm an old man. So getting out there 4-6 times a year, I'm lucky if I can do that. And I hadn't raced for 4 years. I have been so maniacally focused on what I'm doing here But I have a great leadership team around me now. I actually thank them at our leadership offsite. Thank you for for signing up for this, because it's given me just enough time to get out there like 3 or 4 times, and that's all I really need.
That's awesome. I love it. So, your first business though was what was that? Race car related? It was race fan related, right? Or marketing related?
Yeah, yeah. So as a local racer, which is where I grew up racing at two racetracks that were 30 miles apart. We didn't travel far away and tour around and stuff. It was all kind of in our backyard. I had a mind, that was capable of selling sponsorship. The sponsorship drives that sport, unless you're just wealthy and you want a tax write off, right? Some people do it as a tax shelter. I wasn't quite in that place when I was that age. So finding sponsorship sometimes was the difference between being good or bad, or even being out there. So I would take some big swings. Like I would call like brand manager at Tide, or I would call Pepsi corporate, trying to get them to sponsor my little race car in Jamestown, New York. And um, I got tired of beating my head against the wall, but it started to click. What if I were to take the entire sum of grassroots auto racing, all forms of racing, which is like 1,500 racetracks across the United States, and what if you looked at that fan base over the course of the year? What does that look like? And it actually was bigger than NASCAR. And so once I formed that business idea, the concept was, how do I build a marketing platform? And that was the year 2000. So we're right at we're post bubble. People weren't exactly throwing money around, we're in the year 2000, and just, so many .coms went out of business. So I built, again, I'm going to date myself, bricks and clicks model, where I built a racing online property through roll-ups. So I did 5 acquisitions, and we built what became the leading source of news and information for those local grassroots racetracks, to the point where we actually powered NASCAR.com with their own local NASCAR track news. We powered Prime Media, which is a magazine company. They own Car and Driver and Motor Trend, all those big titles. We powered their websites with racing news, Fox Sports. So we ended up building something really special and unique within the racing circle that reached race fans all over the world, that could be bolted onto a traditional marketing or media budget. So Fox Sports would say, hey, you can do a TV buy, but you also get this online buy. So we even sold our own inventory, because we had a consumer-facing website called whowon.com. We had like 50 million views a month, so we could never sell all that inventory. So we actually wholesaled it to the big magazine companies. And then there was the bricks part of it. We actually aggregated, and that'll be a theme through this conversation, we aggregated the marketing rights of these local racetracks, so that now I could call brand manager at Procter & Gamble and say, hey, we've got 650 racetracks. We can put a billboard at every one of them, but based on your customers, we think you should do these 10. And we would actually bring sponsorship. We would show up on the doorstep of these local track promoters who didn't stand a chance in hell of ever, just like myself, right? Securing the money, from those types of companies. And we built a great business. The biggest year we had 650 unique tracks that we executed on the ground marketing programs at.
So what's really fascinating to me about that story is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like what you started with and what you ended with were two drastically different things. Like
Pivot, big pivot.
Pivot
Yeah.
City, right? I mean, talk a little bit about that and how important that is in kind of any startup or founder's journey, and how you got to the place where, okay, I need to pivot from here to here, here to here, and I end up with this.
That's been the theme through all 3 of my startups. And that pivot has happened almost at the exact same moment in all 3 startups. I'd like to say I learned faster, but it's usually month 18. And it takes me that long. You build something, you have an idea, and then you go build something, and then you take it to market, and it works or it doesn't. Or you have customers that lean in and say, hey, if you could do this or that, or you see opportunity. And all 3 businesses was month 18. And pivoting is everything. I think sometimes pivoting it has a negative connotation. I think it's the opposite. And I think it's, I forget who it was, founder of Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn, has a Art of the Pivot, I think, is a book. I haven't read it, but I've done it. And all three businesses, if I didn't pivot, I would have failed. It was certain failure, like guaranteed failure. So you have to listen. To me, the key to pivoting is you listen to every prospective customer, you listen to their customers. Honestly, I've probably had 300 investor pitches, the last 5 years. I don't leave an investor pitch without picking something up. I get something out of that. And it doesn't mean you have to go home and do it. It means you take the sum of all that data and your own gut, your own vision. You say, you know what, we're going to do this. And boy, if ever there was a pivot, it was OneRail, but or an MDOT, quite frankly, my last startup. But it's something you almost have to do. I don't know too many people that get it right on the very first try, as good as it can be.
Okay, let's take a quick time out and give a shout out to one of our sponsors, Rapido Solutions Group. Rapido connects logistics and supply chain organizations in North America with the best nearshore talent to scale efficiently and deliver superior customer service. Rapido works with businesses from all sides of the logistics industry, which includes brokers, carriers, and logistics software companies. Rapido builds out teams with roles across customer and carrier sales and support, back office administration, and technology services. The team at Rapido knows logistics and people. It's what sets them apart. Rapido is driven by an inside knowledge of how to recruit, hire, and train within the industry, and a passion to build better solutions for success. The team is led by CEO Danny Frisco and COO Roberto Icaza, two guys I've worked with from my earliest days in the industry at Coyote. I have a long history with them, and I trust them. I've even been a customer of theirs at Lowe, and let me tell you, they made our business better. In the current market where everyone's trying to do more with less and save money, solutions like Rapido are a great place to start. To learn more, check them out at gorapido.com. That's gorapido.com. Now, let's get back to the show. Yes, it's interesting because you mentioned like the negative connotation around pivoting, and I totally understand that. Thinking about how when you hear pivot, you might think, oh, they're pivoting because their idea failed, right?
Right.
That feels like the first thought. But the alternative perspective is they're pivoting because they've become enlightened. Like something has sparked this opportunity rather than thinking about it through that initial lens of whatever they were doing didn't work. In some cases, maybe it's what you're doing is working, but you see something that works better. And
Exactly.
so I think the added piece to that is never be too committed or too married to what you're doing or your idea, right? And if you are, like, work your idea, work your product and solution, get it in front of as many people as possible, sell it, but do so with both ears open, knowing that there's data in every conversation that you should be aggregating for yourself and for your product and your business to say, like, maybe there's something better, or maybe there's something bigger or more, or just that if we make these adjustments will get us to where we really want to go.
1,000%. Ultimately, you're engineering a business model that's hard to break, right? So you have to break it. You have to figure out where the problems are, whether it's a deficit of supply or you can't sync supply and demand at the right time, and that was what we learned with OneRail. Being a courier first, taught us all the problems of being a courier. And you have to fail. And you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay. And it's, in my opinion, it might sound cliche. It's not a failure till you quit. Michael Jordan, what's his saying? You never lost a game. You just ran out of time, right? You can run out of capital and time in this business, but it's, you just have to be willing to fail a little bit. I was asked to speak at a graduation for my high school, 15 years ago. I actually referenced Big Lots as a land of failure, failed products. But they're still good products. Something was off, It's like, I love going there. You never know. They don't do that anymore. They actually, I don't even know if they're in business, but
I think barely.
Yeah.
So I appreciate all the race talk and your first business. Let's talk about MDOT now, and we'll spend plenty of time on OneRail. Don't worry. But It's fascinating to me to learn about any entrepreneurialism that my guests have participated in. And so, you had a success with the racing marketing business. How did round two come about?
Yeah, I had a non-compete in racing, which when I was running Race Fan, I never envisioned a time when I wouldn't. I learned a lot from that experience. I had a great and still have a great relationship with my angel investor, who wasn't much older than me. But I had a challenge with a guy we brought in to be kind of a third partner and my equal partner. And I was in a situation where I decided to sell my shares back to the company, for a lot of reasons. And it was a hard pill to swallow. I built what I thought, we were cash flow positive within 18 months. We raised very little capital. I mean, it was less than $200,000. It wasn't, but we managed to have 7 digits of revenue and cash flow positive. It was very efficient. But the problem I had, I just didn't see a path forward. So I got out of that and started working in the marketing world. My degree was in food industry management at Cornell. So, I was going to be a brand manager. I was, going to run some facet of a retail business. I love that. I still love that. I think it's a fun business, grocery, CPG. I love all that stuff. So I went and worked with a guy named Dan Benzer. He owned a boutique, small marketing firm in Erie, Pennsylvania, where I lived. And he was working with some big companies that gave me a chance to get my hands dirty, working on brands and working with retailers. And it only took about 8 months for me to start doing things I wasn't supposed to do, because that's what entrepreneurs do. And I started, I don't know, I just had this idea for a savings program wrapped around mobile phone airtime. Now, I know that sounds crazy because prepaid phones are not a big deal here in the United States. But I had this idea, how do you take a cell phone and put coupons on it and shopping features? And again, this was right about the time the iPhone came out. Actually, it was right before it. So the concept of shop, get free airtime, phone utility, mobile payments, kind of wrap it all into one suite and put a special brand on it that you can only buy at Safeway or Kroger. So that was the big idea. And we went down that path and we actually signed Blackhawk Network, which is like the leading prepaid company in the United States. Had no money, had no funding, was completely bootstrapped. And we got on every end cap and every Safeway, which is absolutely insane. So here we are in Erie, Pennsylvania. We have distribution in over 1,000 Safeway stores, running on fumes. I had no money. I had nothing. Like, I would travel out west. I didn't even have money to stay at a Motel 6. Like, it was bad. But we're operating and we're paying our bill to Verizon, and we put this package together called Only One Mobile. So long and short of it, 2008 was a bad time. September of 2008, we finally got a term sheet from a credible venture capital fund. And it was September 8th, if I remember right, when the markets crashed, they pulled the term sheet. And we were out of fumes even at that point. We had nothing. So I pulled Dan and my other partner, Kevin, into my office. At that time, I was working full time on the business. I wasn't working for Dan anymore. So I didn't have a salary. I'm just working, doing a little consulting to keep my lights on at home. And I said, listen, you guys need to go figure out how to wind down that prepaid phone business. And at the time, Kroger actually had a competing brand that was a private label brand. And there was other called MVNOs out there that operated these virtual brands. So I said, you guys need to go do that. I'm going to figure out how to stay out of jail and out of court. And I'm going to come up with something. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to come up with something. Well, through the whole experience, the one thing that people really loved was the sexiness of coupons on a phone. And if you've probably seen these old videos of what they call flying machines, all the different inventions of airplanes that look nothing like airplanes today. The one that has the wings that actually flap. But, there was all kinds of flying machines for mobile phones because nobody could figure out, like, how do I take value here, transact it in a point of sale, have it not slow anything down, not put hardware in the store. Well, this little thing called the cloud came out. And now we're sitting in 2008. And I ended up 30 days. It took me 30 days, and I architected MDOT. And essentially, it was a real-time cloud-enabled billing switch. It was just like a Visa MasterCard switch. And the state of Pennsylvania told me no 3 times to the cell phone idea that nobody would fund, for good reasons too, by the way. But state of Pennsylvania came over. He said, "Wow, you nailed it. We're in." And so he gave us $50,000. So I went and found 2 amazing people from a company called Catalina Marketing. They're the company that prints the coupons at the point of sale. Well, they both were chief architects from Catalina. We had a functional demo within 3 months. We raised $4 million in 2 years. We sold the company to the market leader, Inmar, who today has over a 70% market share with that platform. And what we did is we connected the point of sale to the cloud. We found a way to do it in 200 milliseconds. And the hardest part of that journey, it wasn't like I had geniuses working for me. I came up with the idea. It needs to do this. They figured it out. I found good people. But the hardest part of that journey was convincing big retailers to trust their data in the cloud. Think about that in 2009 and 10. That's scary. The cloud's a new thing. So we ended up winning the Amazon Global Startup Challenge, the AWS Challenge, met Andy Jassy, got a big foam $100,000 check. And it was within months of that we were acquired. And the reason I sold, I really didn't want to sell. But I'm also a realist. And I like to say I'm always going to get out of the car before it flips over and burns. I will get out of that car. And if it's rolling, we're going to get out, we're getting out of the car. So I have a pretty good instinct for when to hold them and when to fold them. Right. And I'm looking at the market. It's still all messed up. It's 2010. VCs are tight, even after winning the global challenge. Nobody's doling out venture capital for ideas. And at that point, we had signed about 5 contracts with big retailers, including the federal government, to do DECA. And it just was impossible. Every VC up Sand Hill Road said, "We want to see data points first. We trust you. We know you've got it. Your solution's amazing. We need to see data points." Seeing data points in that industry is hard because retailers only update their point of sale once a year. So your sales cycle is a year, the update cycle is a year, rollout period. So I looked at it and I had a great CFO. And we came to the conclusion, we can't raise enough capital to at the right valuation to get enough data points to ratchet the value up. It doesn't make sense. Let's sell to a market leader. And Inmar is the one that I felt had the most upside because of where they were in the industry. They hadn't really deployed a digital strategy yet. They had like 2 people working on digital out of 1,000 people. And they were the right partner. And it was a very successful acquisition for us. We didn't raise a lot of capital, so it was a good one.
That's a fascinating story of how you go from just idea to meeting Andy Jassy, winning Amazon Global Startup of the Year. I mean, sometimes in this case, it sounds like just you hit the nail on the head with the right idea, and then you got to go execute. Mike,
yeah,
go ahead.
Well, I learned. So it's funny. What I learned at RaceFan parlayed in a lot of ways into MDOT. What I did at RaceFan was aggregate. I aggregated marketing rights. And what we did at MDOT, half of the story was the cloud. And that's where we won on not putting hardware in the store, keeping CapEx down and all that stuff. The other side of it, though, we aggregated every coupon provider in the industry into one massive pool of coupon supply, because the problem was coupons.com, all these different coupon providers were going into retailers saying they were the Muhammad Ali of coupons and you need to do a point of sale integration with us. And their point of sale integration sometimes would take 24 hours for the coupon to load onto the shopper cart. Ours was, again, milliseconds. You'd be stopped in the shopping lane and loading. So the aggregation of supply, connecting it to demand in real time, and then orchestrating that is what won the day.
Yeah, I can see that. My only other question on this business is around selling it. And you talked about kind of knowing to get out of the car, when it's rolling and before it burns. It's hard.
But
when I think about when we sold our business, I've gotten a lot of credit, not credit we deserve, but I've gotten a lot of credit after the fact for timing because we sold a logistics business in November of 2021 and then the market crashed in 22 and is still not really recovered.
Yeah.
But like and when I think back to like the conversations we were having, like, is it the right time? Is it the right buyer? The time question is so hard to answer because you can't predict the future, certainly. And
Yeah.
but one thing I remember was, our banker telling us like, there's this really concerning real estate issue happening in China, that one of the top real estate companies is going under. That's going to impact everything here, and things like that. You don't realize, like, as an employee, you have no idea what's going on in your CEO's head as he's contemplating or she's contemplating selling a business. But I'm just curious from your perspective, like, it sounds like you built a very unique product that maybe if you did hold on for 2 or 3 more years, you build more scale and you're talking, 10x, 20, 30, 40x a sale price. How do you think about like knowing when the time is right and kind of making that decision?
I feel like I could have made either path work. At the end of the day, I don't think I could. I think I still could have made it successful. But we believed in the acquirer probably as much as they believed in us. So we saw a diamond in the rough. We saw an acquirer that was very profitable, that had New Mountain Capital behind them. They had a good private equity backer, and they were devoid of digital talent, but they had 2,000 customers that could buy our product. So when I looked at them, and then we did have opportunities with about 4 companies at the same time, we made a decision, the equity upside, the way we structured the deal, we could be part of the next transaction. That was a big part of it. But ultimately, what it really comes down to, I'm sure you get this question all the time. When are you going to sell? When are you going to sell? What are you doing? What's your path? What's your plan? I get that question multiple times a week. And my answer has been the same for a very long time. When I wake up in the morning, what's my balance sheet? What's the competitive ecosystem? Where's the market? Where am I relative to the competitive ecosystem in the market? What's the TAM? How much runway, is there to grow? And then you make a decision. And there, to me, there is no prefab answer to that question. For me, I couldn't answer it. Now, do I have intuitions? Yeah, I have intuitions, but it's not driven by my needs. It's driven by what's the right thing based on all those variables. So with MDOT, we had the right thing at the right time. We had the right people. The market was really early, and it was a lot earlier than we thought it was. It didn't really start scaling until 17 and 18. I sold the company in 11. So there was boxes that weren't checked. My balance sheet was awful. My personal balance sheet right now is a lot better than what the company's was. So I'm just, you just kind of consider all those things. But I will say, conviction for the acquirer was a big part of the decision.
Got it. I appreciate that. A lot of really valuable insight there. I like thinking about the kind of competitive marketplace and kind of the room to run and kind of where you are and where you are personally, where the business is. I like thinking about all of that. So I appreciate that insight.
Well, it also came down to where could we make the impact. And to the credit of the CEO, he saw the talent of my team. And we felt like we could still be entrepreneurial at Inmar. And we were encouraged to be entrepreneurial at Inmar. And that made a big difference.
Gotcha.
Holy sh**. That is what everyone says when they see Genlog's truck intelligence platform for the first time. Founded by ex-CIA operatives and fueled by 15 million daily images across a nationwide camera network, Genlogs gives you the power of total market capacity while also defending you against fraudulent carriers. Holy sh** is what Genlogs customers say again when they see the ROI from covering loads faster with fatter margins. Holy shippers. That's right. Genlogs unveils the locations and lanes for all the shippers in America. In the era of artificial intelligence, nothing beats actual intelligence from verified by video data. See what Genlogs can do for you. Check out a demo at genlogs.io. Again, that is GENLOGS.io. Tell them Andrew sent you, and they'll include their carrier compliance suite for free. And if you haven't already, I interviewed their founder, Ryan Joyce, last year, and it's one of my personal favorite episodes that we've done. Check it out. Now, let's get back to the show.
All right. Well, it's time to move on to the entree of the episode, the business you're currently building, OneRail. Talk to me about how this all came to be. What what is OneRail? What was the original issue or idea that sparked your desire to build it?
Yeah, just, I was working on a business plan for kind of an omni-channel marketing platform. It was kind of like M.2.0 that could transact currency, like Bitcoin. It could transact benefits, healthcare benefits. And then the concept was, how do you marry all digital touch points into one, essentially view, one pane of glass? So I've been working on that. I had a couple hundred pages of documentation. I'd been at it for a few months, and I had some I thought I had some conviction for that, until I ran into this problem. I was trying to get a refrigerator delivered, and they told me it was going to take 10 days. I was at a major retailer in the home improvement space, not to be named. But they told me it would take 10 days. And it was also like very assumptive of me. I bought it. I paid. Oh, by the way, I'll be home all day. You can just get that to me anytime today, because I'm just hanging out writing this business plan on something I was calling OmniPoint. And they said, "Oh, sir, I'm sorry to tell you, it's going to take 10 days. I'm like, well, that's commercially irresponsible. Like, how could it take 10 days? And yeah, we have these rider trucks, and we rent them, and we don't have any full-time delivery people. We do the deliveries when we can, and we can't get to it until probably 10 days. It was probably 10 days. It might've been longer. So thankfully I had an F-350 dually sitting at home, and I went home and got it and delivered the refrigerator. But I'm not joking. From the moment that associate said those words, and this is just the way my brain works, instantly started searching for Uber for delivery, Uber for moving, guy with a truck.
When was this? Give me a time frame.
The idea was September of 15.
Okay, so this is over 10 years ago. Okay.
Idea. Yeah. So that, I couldn't put it down. Then I whatever I'm doing, I have to become a student of it. And so I start, I don't know anything about logistics. I was a major shareholder at Inmar. We happen to have 36 warehouses processing product returns, but I didn't work on that part of the business. I didn't know anything about logistics and supply chain, which ironically, I don't know if they still give kids these ASFAB tests. It tests your comprehension of math and science and mechanical skills. And it used to be a military aptitude test that was required. I don't think it's required anymore. But when I was 18, I took that test and it said, your future is in supply chain. And I thought, what the hell is supply chain? Mm-hmm. I want to drive a race car. So
that's kind of supply chain.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It all came full circle. Like the test actually worked. Yeah. Right. So yeah, that was the genesis of this, and I couldn't put it down. And so I just start going really deep in gig, moving, the whole Amazon effect and what was going on at that time, which Prime was relatively a new idea. So what I did, and I'm never afraid to air my failures. I applied for a job at Amazon, and I didn't get it. And I have a very good friend who's also an advisor to this company. His name's Neil Ackerman, and he has 13 supply chain patents at Amazon. I called up Neil, and I actually worked with him when I was an intern at Philip Morris. I said, Neil, I see you've got a product job open. I'd love to work on product. I'm really intrigued about same day, and delivery in general. And he put me through the rigor, and I didn't get the job. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to create my own job. And at the time I had gone through a divorce. My assets weren't really that great. But I ended up taking the better part of 9 months, and I built it myself. I built the entire thing myself. And the first iteration that kind of got me here was the build of an on-demand moving platform, and went to market with it in a couple cities. Started generating 20,000 a month, 30,000 a month, started getting revenue. It was consumer facing. There was no B2B element. And through all that learning, and then Lisa and I started working together. We met, during that journey, and Lisa is my co-founder. I kind of dropped that business, it was like a petri dish of learning. And I had no angel money at that time. So it was all out of my pocket, but then reincorporated and started something fresh, basically January of 2018, around this concept of aggregating supply. So I kind of got my brain, operating this for a year, realized I'm never going to have the right amount of supply in the right place at the right time without having an immense amount of capital. So that's when we pivoted. It was a quarter pivot, but we were still doing moving and delivery, and then we were starting to do delivery. So built a small team, raised some money. Actually, Stephen Boll, the founder of coupons.com, was one of my first angel investors. He was one of my biggest competitors and frenemies with my previous company, but he came in, gave us a lot of support early on. And, long and short of it, it was when I started meeting with VCs, and really starting to look at how I capitalize this, I realized what I was doing wasn't all that sexy, and it wasn't all that exciting, and it really wasn't any different than anybody else that was doing that. So it was frustrating because we built a really cool business. And like I told Lisa, we could do this just bootstrapping it for forever. We could probably do pretty well, but I'm intrigued by how we can change the dynamics, in last mile delivery. I didn't want to be in home moving. Home moving is a tough business.
So when you say you could do this forever and you've got this business it's kind of working, that was that at that point you were basically just an operator with assets or no assets, and you were doing home deliveries or doing moving.
It was the Uber model, right? It was a gig model. So we would recruit drivers who had their own trucks. It was called Zapped. So we would recruit drivers that had their own trucks, and we would, just like Uber does, put them through an onboarding process. We procured insurance, and then we would advertise because it was consumer facing, and people would use our app to book a home move or a delivery.
Okay.
And we would dispatch it. And it was a rapid service too. We were guaranteeing that we would have people to your house within an hour. And it was very seldom that we couldn't, but it was so hard. It was so hard. And it was after doing that for about a year and a half, ironically 18 months, that I realized, what you did at MDOT is exactly what you need to do here. You need to aggregate supply. There's plenty of great couriers out there like GoShare and Bungie were early on. Roadie was early on. There's all these great couriers out there. And then if I'm a shipper, wouldn't I just want to put all my data through one engine to figure out if it should go parcel or courier or LTL? Why would I want to have like multiple TMSs and solutions to do all that? So the concept is identical to what we're doing now. And the model was real simple. Have a multimodal shipping platform for last mile delivery, aggregate all these couriers into one massive pool, have a way to sort out, good performers and bad performers kind of in real time. Give the easy button to the retailer so they can scale an Amazon-like strategy. And that's what OneRail became.
And when did OneRail officially launch?
So we officially, so it was September of 19 where I made the big decision to shut off the on-demand moving. And it was hard. I mean, it still was revenue and it still was somewhat cash flow positive, but that was when the real pivot happened. I would say the moment we shut revenue off and we had to regroup, brought in advisors, from Neil Ackerman being one of them, who had the Amazon background, and some key people that had invested. And we started to move forward. And at that time, we had our first customer. I built the first prototype for OneRail, actually worked. And it was American Tire Distributors. And they became not only a customer, but a fairly significant investor early on. They weren't signed, but there was a lot of interest. There was a lot of curiosity. There was kind of a commitment, but we didn't have contracting done. So that was September 19. And then we announced our first funding round in February of 20, right before the COVID lockdown.
What were some of your thoughts around moving from consumer customer to a base to like a more retail B2B customer base?
Honestly, it's more in my wheelhouse. If you look at MDOT, it was completely white labeled B2B software, B2B to C. B2B to C it tends to be where I do best, and white labeling tends to be where I do best. And aggregating is usually a central theme. So it sort of checked all those boxes, and then it was just a matter, once we had line of sight to capital with Las Olas and Chicago Ventures, then it was really a matter of how do we start putting the right people in place, because our team was pretty thin. So I found a great CTO, David Dashler, started hiring real engineers where I didn't have to tether things together with Zapier to make it work. And we were kind of off to the races at that point.
And before your product existed, what did the solution look like for Lowe's or Home Depot in terms of managing this part of their business?
Yeah, so I like to think of it, pre OneRail, it's a very static decisioning process, and in some cases, non-digital. So what we saw, was sort of a hardwiring of, if a delivery comes in this zip code, give it to this courier without contemplation of if they have capacity or not. Because most, TMSs are highly efficient around LTL, FTL, ocean, air, rail. What we found was TMSs struggle to get into that granular courier ecosystem. And you got the big guys like Uber and DoorDash, and at the time Lyft up here. But what about Tom's really good delivery service that has box trucks in Boise, Idaho? Who's tapping into that? And so how do we harness all this supply so that we can offer a network that has sedans all the way up through flatbeds? And that's really what the challenge was. And TMS solutions, even now, really, that's not the focus, to get into that granular and then complex decisioning. What's the right network at the right time of day based on demand cycles and demand curves? So our customers were using Excel. They were, in some cases, would just open up a roadie portal and enter a delivery. And that's what we saw at American Tire Distributors. They would get an order on a green screen over here. And then over here, they had another do swivel chair, and they would enter into a UI the delivery data. It took 10 minutes to do that. And we were able to do it, like a credit card swipe. As soon as the order hit Oracle, it would go right into our system, and we decision upon it and dispatch, all like a credit card swipe. And that's where the word rail came from, was the payment industry.
That's so interesting, because the first time I ever heard OneRail, I just assumed it was something to do with the trains, intermodal.
Yeah, it was difficult for me. I think it was Craig Fuller. He never holds his words back. So I went to, it was Dynamo Ventures invited me to their founder camp, and it was literally at the moment of pivot. We had to write a website for that event. We had to put everything together. We had nothing. We just came up with the name OneRail. And he comes up to me. There was a reception at FreightWaves. He said, "So what's going on with the rail and last mile? I don't understand it." I'm like, well, and I didn't know him from Adam at that point, because I'm not from this industry, right? I'm the outsider. But profound respect there. He got it, because he has a fintech background. And a lot of people don't realize when you swipe a credit card, there's 6 to 8 transactions that happen instantly, and handoffs of data and execution, rules, governance, data privacy, and security, all that wrapped into one transaction. That was my vision for what last mile could be. It should be one seamless transaction that happens in milliseconds, where there's data exchange, there's real-time telemetry, there's governance, there's data privacy and security, there's rules. And that's why the word rail is in our name. It's a rail for last mile fulfillment.
Yeah, I like it. I'm curious, the customer base, is it all kind of enterprise retailers, or is there a long tail too of like mom pop, does that fit into this business or not so much?
We have focused maniacally on big enterprise. Um, the thought process. So that back when, September of 19, when I sat around the table with my advisors and a few people, we made a conscious decision. Let's go tackle some of the biggest shippers in the United States. And that's hard, right? That's not conventional wisdom. A lot of times with a startup, hey, let's go do kind of an off-Broadway presentation with some SMBs and then we can move upstream. I had enough gray hair at that point and enough confidence, I think, in having made MDOT successful, which point of sale is hard in different ways than logistics. It's brain surgery. Nobody trusts point of sale development. So the way we were able to do that and make it seamless and scale it, I carried a little bit of, enough credibility to go into a big retailer and say, hey, I did this over here. I'm doing this over here. So we made a conscious decision, just big enterprise. And we haven't veered from that. And the thought process, which you'll understand better than anybody, density is the key to success. So if I go out there and sign Bob's Furniture and a consignment shop, and I'm not building any density, that was what I learned being a courier, was how the hell do I ever get there? Like, because my network would walk away. It was like herding cats. I'd recruit these people and I didn't have enough deliveries or moves to give them, and they would leave. I didn't want to have that problem, which is why we decided aggregate all the supply of couriers and we become a source of remnant capacity for them. Instead of we either eat or we don't eat today based on what OneRail's doing, which is kind of what the other, the first version of the business, they would rely on us because they were our drivers.
So help me understand, is OneRail more the guts of it's the system, or is it also the intermediary between Lowe's and all of the couriers? And if the latter is correct, well, let me just answer that first and then I'll ask my follow-up.
Yeah. Probably the biggest challenge I had in raising capital was this very topic, which hasn't been a problem, for several rounds. But in the early, seed and Series A, well, it was a challenge. We are a platform first. We are a software company. We have 90 engineers. We exchange tens of billions of API transactions a year. Very, very much a technology platform, and we lead with that. Now, on top of that, we have aggregated this network, and our customers can elect to use that network if they don't want to go out and procure Bob's Really Good Trucking in Boise, Idaho, whom we've already onboarded and have API connected, or they're using our app. So and this was something that Jeff Silver thought was quite fascinating because he's never seen anybody pull it off. And when somebody like that tells you that, you listen, and you're both scared and excited all at the same time. But this was about a year ago. He told me that I haven't seen anybody really pull that move off. It's a hard move to pull off because you're essentially ratcheting up supply and demand, and it has to be timed right, because that same problem can happen where you lose interest of a network if you can't keep it busy. So we own the platform, we license that to our customers, and then we have some customers that use only our capacity. So we give our customers a rate card, one single rate card that spans 1,500 delivery companies. And we have a team of 20 on data science and AI that have completely optimized that. So we know who is the right network at the right time of day, in the right zip code, for a certain speed or SLA, even down to a product level. And that's how we've been able to do this. If it wasn't for data science and AI, we could not do what we do. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yes.
There's one more thing, though. There's a third layer. The third layer we learned from the hard knocks of being a moving company, and that's the human support. So we have an exception management team. So not only do we provide the tech that bolts onto your existing systems, OMS, TMS, et cetera, we provide capacity. So if you don't have capacity, we have capacity. The third component is the team that's managing exceptions that the technology can't handle. And doing about 300,000 deliveries a day, there's deliveries that we still have to touch. And that number gets fewer and fewer as a percentage basis. But it's the third leg of the platform.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Let's give a quick shout out to our sponsor, cloneops.ai. Logistics moves fast. There are calls to make, updates to send, documents to track. Your customers are always waiting. cloneops.ai helps teams stay ahead with a platform that can be white labeled and a marketplace of AI agents built for real logistics operations. Inside the CloneOps marketplace, you'll find agents for tracking, documents, after-hours support, finance workflow, fraud prevention, and more. These agents plug into your workflows and existing systems to handle the repetitive tasks, whether it's making calls, sending emails, replying to texts, gathering info, or writing updates. Your team stays in control with real-time visibility into every interaction. And because the AI is always turned on, operations keeps moving even when your team can't. A standout is Carrier Screening Plus Voice ID, which ties a voice to a DOT number and alerts your team when that same voice appears across different or multiple DOT numbers, helping catch fraudsters before they cause damage. No one else has this. And for companies building a long-term AI strategy, cloneops.ai gives you the ability to white label, build, own, and control every AI use case across your business. And this team is run by David Bell, founder and leader who I've known for years, a good friend of mine, and someone who, frankly, anything he touches in this industry turns to gold. I trust him with what he's building here. If you're ready for automation that supports your people, visit cloneops.ai. Now let's get back to the show.
Got it. I appreciate that because now I definitely understand better. And I do think it's fascinating to pile on. The follow-up question I had, you kind of started to answer in your added third point, but in knowing that it is both a platform and kind of this intermediary where you own relationships with, I think you said 1,500 delivery services, courier services, how valuable in this kind of business, and my comparison is to freight brokerage, where the relationship between the broker, the intermediary, and the driver carrier themselves is really important because that carrier can take that Chicago to Dallas load from 20 other companies. Is there a similar dynamic in your world where there's like a relationship being managed regularly by the OneRail team and the couriers? Or is it like, in Boise, they're going to get the delivery from Lowe's and it's coming from you anyways? Or like, is that on the table for 7 other companies to also be bidding on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So from moment one, we took a success-based approach where we have a team, that's out there perpetually recruiting couriers to join the network. And it's based on our heat map, SLA success, new programs coming up. US Foods was a big shift for us. Going into refrigerated and frozen was we didn't have any refrigerated frozen assets. So we needed to start building that network. And there's specializations, as you know, in industrial supply, pipe trucks and glass trucks and different things. So one investor asked me, who didn't become an investor because I don't think it would have been a good fit, but so are you going to be done at some point, like recruiting all these No, we're never. It's like trying to surf to the end of the internet. We'll never be done. You want us to just stop managing the carriers? So we have a team that recruits and onboards. We do all the insurance certifications and we track that digitally, whether they're in compliance or not. And then we have a success team. And that's all about QA. And that's kind of, I think, getting to what your question is. Very much like we manage our customers, we have QBRs, with the biggest ones. Obviously, we're not going to do that with all 1,500. And quite frankly, it's the 80-20 rule, as you can imagine. We have a handful of, handful is in a couple hundred couriers that are doing most of the business. And we dedicate a lot of resources to coaching them. They get all the metrics, around every market. And we have a team that manages them. So that's been our approach. And quite frankly, it's very similar to what of brokerage. It's just in a different mode.
What does the competitive landscape look like compared to the brokerage world? Where in brokerage, we had 40,000 competitors and it was fairly undifferentiated. I feel like it's got to be a different environment you're dealing with.
I think it was harder for you in a lot of ways, and within that space, because there are so many competitors and the barriers to entry aren't quite as high as building this spaceship platform. It's so that makes it harder in a lot of ways. But for us, we don't think of one single competitor. We have competitors in the software space. We have Some of our own couriers, are also trying to work directly with retailers or industrial distribution, uh, uh, wholesale companies. So we kind of have a couple different pillars of competitors, and it's been that way from day one. There's not many software companies that want to roll their sleeves up and manage transportation.
Yeah, that's true. Has AI been a transformative element to the business the last few years in how you think about what you're building, or is it more like a somewhat helpful add-on to create a few efficiencies?
It may actually be why we're still in business, to be like to totally level set that. I
Elaborate.
just did this, yeah, I just did this math yesterday. So when we started in the prototype environment that myself and another guy named Barr built, well, we actually launched a live customer with. Um, we had dispatchers. So think of it as a digital dispatch model where an order would come in from Menard's Home Improvement. It would go into the dispatcher screen. Based on zip code, it would populate couriers in that zip code. And then the dispatcher picked the right courier. How they picked the right courier, I have no idea. They picked a courier. There was no logic behind which courier they picked. So it was very dumb. There was no AI, there was no data optimization. It was literally get an order here, get it here. Because the problem we were really trying to solve at first was Excel and phone calls and email. So that's where we started. When I brought in David Dashler, though, he conceptualized this a lot like video streaming, where we need to rifle deliveries at a delivery company as fast as we can, and then when we see degradation, pull them back. And then that led to this whole concept of a credit score, essentially, for a courier, but at a market level, at an SLA level, not carte blanche, right? If you're serving 400 cities, it might just be Detroit's messed up. You don't want to penalize a courier for that. So the concept of how we leveraged AI and data science, it was built into the first line of code from when David started writing the code. But where we really got serious was when we launched Lowe's, and now we're in 1,700 stores. We started to expose cracks. And we had cracks in the network. We had cracks in how we were selecting couriers, cost containment, et cetera. So one of the probably the better decisions I've made a lot of bad ones, but one good one I'm happy about is I got David to agree, hey, we need you to come over here and be the EVP of data science and AI. And then I went out and found a scale CTO, Chris Kucharski. He was the SVP of engineering at Angie's List. And actually he was the CTO at DAT, Freight and Analytics, before OneRail. So I found a great CTO. Not that David wasn't, but I needed somebody to fill that slot and be able to scale the hell out of this team. And then I needed David. David had started experimenting with data science and AI stuff. He grabbed me in the office one day like a little kid and sat me next to him. He showed me all this stuff. I said, David, are you having fun being the CTO? Is it fun for you? Because I didn't think it was. And he said, not really. I said, is this fun? Yeah. I'm like, okay, how would you like to just do this during the day? So David, what it did is it turned the business, into a totally different business. He started building a team. We only had 3 people on the team to start. Today, the team has 16, 17, couple PhDs. And what we do with that team, yes, we're always implementing internally new efficiencies for how we can, grow margin. But the bulk, probably 80% of the focus is how do we continue to optimize that decision further and further and further. We have a price prediction index just like DAT does for LTL and FTL. We have that for last mile. I don't know who else has that. We've never productized it, like brought it to the market. We're going to. So being able to have really unique data from our execution, I think will really help our continued scale and flywheel as we start to build it. But I'll share one number with you, bringing it back to digital dispatcher. Digital dispatcher could do 80 a day. That's not a lot. We also didn't have a lot. We only had a few hundred deliveries. One head today can do 4,000 deliveries roughly. So, and that's not dispatching, it's triaging, exceptions. So I figured it out. We'd have to have 3,700 employees to digitally dispatch all the orders that we have. And we couldn't be in business. There's no way we would even be in business. So it's life and death, data science and AI for us.
What percent of orders have exceptions in this business?
Roughly. Yeah. So it ranges. That's kind of a tough question because if we're talking about auto parts and we're talking, we do a lot with Advanced Auto Parts, worked with them, all 5,000 stores for the last few years. You're talking fractional percentages because it's a very simple delivery. You're taking a parcel sized package most of the time and you're going, a mile, 5 miles. And then the networks that are doing those deliveries, they're very mature networks. It's not necessarily your localized. It's more the national providers. So that's pretty easy. We signed a furniture chain and holy cow, whole different dynamic. We had like a 12% exception rate. Now humans didn't have to touch 12%, but it was a 12% exception rate. So yeah, it ranges from almost nothing to 12%.
And what are those common exceptions you run into on these types of deliveries?
Yeah, if we're going back to the more simple deliveries, it could be wrong address or missing items. But if it gets into furniture, it could be a lot of things. Maybe they're having a challenge getting into the neighborhood, or maybe customers not home to receive because you got to have somebody there to receive it and put it in the house. And we actually would do white glove too, not just delivery. So getting into the nuances of damage, there's obviously when you cross the threshold, there's a lot of risk. There's a lot of things can happen. You can gouge a floor, you can ding a door jam. So the exceptions change based on the parameters of what you're delivering. We have temperature monitoring, for refrigerated and frozen. So if we see something off there, it'll flag it. And so, yeah, we see a huge variance. We think through that, as we're working with a customer, make sure that they're supported the right way. But yeah, it's a good question. I wish there was one universal response to that, but it's a range.
And what is the kind of risk look like in terms of navigating damages and whatnot? Because I totally see how delivering a refrigerator, the wood gets scuffed or this or that, and like how often are they, especially in homes, like a homeowner's just pointing the finger at the delivery guy says, it was like that when I got here. I'm imagining my own life as I'm asking this question. And just, does any of that fall back to you guys, or it's all kind of passed through as the intermediary?
We take the full risk. And I know that sounds crazy, but we take the full risk. And we do that when it's under our authority.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's under our authority, we take the full risk. And we've just found a way to manage it, manage it really well. We carry insurance, FMCSA bonded. So we're on the hook. And that's what I wanted to sign up for. And that's why it's a unique business. Because I don't think there's too many people that really want to sign up for both sides of the house there. But data science is the key to everything. We can start to see patterns really early. Where do loss runs come from? Is it a carrier problem or is it a SKU problem? Is it an SLA problem? Are we trying to, maybe it's too fast of a delivery for a complex product. We need to tell the customer, don't do that. So it's, there's no universal rule around that, but yeah, we are managing the whole thing soup to nuts.
Yeah, see, I like that a lot, and it reminds me of feelings and thoughts I had, because in freight brokerage, 99% of brokers are just passing through any of that stuff and saying, hey, hey customer, you're my top customer, but this issue happened, and I understand I pick the carrier, but like I'm not paying for it. Like the carrier's got to pay for it, or I'm not paying for it. And just that lack of accountability always irked me. And so I wanted us to kind of take more ownership. And I think we definitely took more ownership than the average. But even so, like, your insurance team would be like, this is not how it's supposed to work. Like, we're not supposed to be accountable for this. I'm like, yeah, but like, that's it's what we're signing up for to an extent. Is we picked that carrier and they screwed up, so it's kind of on us. And so I see how that would be a differentiator that you could leverage in your sales process if you're and the better point you make too is around, listen, okay, we've made the commitment, like we're owning it, soup to nuts. Now, rather than just wish and hope that that doesn't hurt us, let's leverage every piece of data we have, every experience to learn from and say, hey, you know what? These furniture loads have a 12% exception. We need to have higher margins on these loads or we're not doing them. Like it just is not worth it to us. If I'm taking all that risk and there's constantly an issue, it reminds me of a seafood customer I had who there were always claims on these frozen seafood loads. And it was oftentimes it was just the pallets had been like pierced by clearly by a forklift as someone was poorly, trying to load or unload the product. And we always would just get blamed for it. And I'm like, listen, there's one common denominator here. I mean, you've got one shipping location, 6 delivery locations, 6 different carriers, and only one company that's like involved in every transaction. It's clearly happening at your shipping location. They're like, oh, we don't care. You have to accept it or not. And I'd say, okay, I accept it, but I'm charging you an extra $500 a load. And he's like, that's fine. Because he didn't want to deal with the issue. So he was like, that's fine. You can charge me the extra money per load. I just need these loads delivered. So I just bring that up as an example of like, you always have a choice. And based on the decision you make, leverage every piece of data you have to put your business in the best position to execute effectively.
100%. Yeah, that resonates for sure. There's I was at NRF this week. Have to think, feels like a month ago, but it was actually Sunday. And Ed Stack, the CEO or chairman of Dick's Sporting Goods, was speaking, and it was one of the best lines I've ever heard. And he was talking about their culture and sort of how they approach problems. And you never say no because. Don't ever lead with no because. You lead with yes if. And that gets back to, yes, we can do this work if we can correlate risk to reward, right? I was so moved by that because that's really how Lisa and I have approached this business. It's with our customers. We seldom say no. We never say no. It's yes if, but I never framed it as well and eloquently as he did. So that says it all. Yes if.
It's the difference between looking for solutions and avoiding problems.
Yes, exactly.
Right. And I think that's I appreciate you sharing that. I've never heard that. And I agree wholeheartedly because it always opens the door, because someone asks you, should we do this? And if you start with no, because the door's closed. If you start with yes, if the door is open, it's saying, hey, yes. And then it brings up what the potential challenges are that would prevent you from moving forward. But you're looking at it through the lens of how do we open this door and figure it out?
I found that to be a great trait with venture funds and investors. You get a no, you get a pass. All right, what's it going to take for that not to be a pass? Well, you got to go sign this contract. You need a CTO. You need this. You need that. And I show back up on your doorstep, 2 months later, and I've done this, and this. It's kind of hard not to get a term sheet if I did this, and this. So it works in almost every facet, Yeah, I'm really, honestly, that's probably one of the best things I took away from the show across everything.
That might be the best thing I take from this interview, if I'm being honest. No offense to everything else you've said. It's been great, but that has stuck with me. So I appreciate that.
It's brilliant. He's a brilliant guy. It was one of the best presentations I've seen at the show.
So speaking of term sheets, you all raised your Series C. How much was that for?
$42 million.
$42 million. That's a lot of money. So what are we doing with $42 million? What's changing about this business with $42 million in the bank?
I will say it was the first year of running this business last year that I didn't have to raise capital. That felt really good. We got to actually work on the business, be heads down. We've raised about 109 since February of 20, and it's a lot of capital. 25, 30% of it has come from our customers, which, I'm really proud of. And that's been a huge, I think, driver of the deep relationships. It's a great signal that we're really creating some differentiation for them. But at the end of the day, it's all about growth. It was a growth investment. We've never been a grow at all costs company. That's just not in my DNA. It gets back to the frugal racer.
Mm-hmm.
But we do things, to continue to drive into new verticals, drive deeper into the verticals that are working. We just opened an office in Krakow, Poland for engineering, where we're building out a team there. And that's a big part of, I think, where we'll see the engineering kind of roadmap go. Is that team is just great people there, very skilled. And it's good to have a presence in Europe. We have not done really any major international expansion yet, but the purpose of the growth round was entirely about driving growth. So sales and marketing, making sure that we can continue to build on our product roadmap, secondary to growth. And we did a small acquisition last year. It was an order management solution. We believe some of the answers, to unlocking true like cost to serve impact and quality of service impact resides further upstream in the order flow. So that's why we're partnered with IBM Sterling. It's why we acquired an OMS, and we're going to continue to look for ways, that we can get further upstream and just penetrate some of the intelligence up there so we can make more impact at the doorstep.
So when you think about, we talked earlier and you brought up, this was more around the idea of like, when is it time to sell the business? But the questions you ask yourself at that time, I'm curious how they might apply in this current environment where it's, where is OneRail today in, where's the competitive market right now? What does the TAM still look like for OneRail? Does this feel like, in terms of your penetration, does it feel like you're in the second inning? Does it feel like you're in the seventh inning? Are we doing the seventh inning stretch right now? Like, where are we there? And then separate from that, you mentioned buying an OMS, and it sounds like there's still a lot of evolution on what the product can be. And so I'm curious on that front, like, where are we? Is it early innings still, or are we really feeling like we're almost there?
Yeah, great question. And I wake up every day and, take inventory of where we are and where I think, first of all, I keep it's a big canvas of Jeff Bezos sitting at his desk. I want to say it's 1997 or 8. And Amazon is spray painted on a banner with a can of spray paint on the wall. You've probably seen that image. And that's one of my favorite images because I look at it, there's a reason it's on the wall. I see it every day. I got to look at it. And it's not, it's always day one. I love that concept. But the reason that's on the wall, when I look at that and looking at it right now, did that man really know what he was going to do? Did he really, really know what he was going to pull off at that stage of the game? And I have some ideas for where I think this can go. And I think we're in the early innings of last mile transformation. We've gotten close with a lot of the consulting companies. We work really closely with a lot of the investment banks, and they're a great source of information. And it feels like there's about a 7-year, 8-year investment cycle ahead of us to really complete a digital supply chain transformation. And what we are seeing is last mile, specifically how we do it, is not the first thing people are thinking about. We're still early days. I mean, we've been able to grow every year, and we've been real fortunate during some of the headwinds and difficulties in the market. That's why we were able to raise capital. It got really hard to raise capital. And, we've been real fortunate. We've positioned ourselves the right way, I think. But it's entirely the same formula as it's always been for me. Now, I feel like we're in a place where the market's still kind of early. If I go through the check boxes, right? Market's still kind of early. Not as early as MDOT was, but it's early. If you consider international expansion, it's real early. If you look at the team and the tech and how it stacks up, we feel we have a great solution. We have a great team. The market is ultra competitive. It's never been more competitive. We see, companies emerging all the time. And I think, you'll see some roll-ups over the next couple of years. I think you're going to start to see that activity. We want to be a buyer. We don't want to be a seller. We want to be a buyer. So we still very much have a lot of fuel in the tank, from that C round. We've been real careful. The company has continued to get a lot more profitable. We're not profitable yet, but we believe we will be this year. And so exiting is the last thing I'm thinking about right now. I'm thinking about, how can I be a buyer? How can I take my operating system, just like iOS, and append as many apps onto it as I can to run last mile fulfillment, from inventory to doorstep. And that's where my headspace is. And as we look at what's ahead this year, we have a very exciting announcement that's going to happen in at the end of Q1, beginning of Q2, with a key customer. So that's coming. Will drive a lot of growth for us. We're also doing a lot more to embed our solution. So we're kind of now in a place where partnerships are starting to become a key for our distribution. So how do we get embedded in OMSs? How do we get embedded in TMSs so that we become the de facto last mile shipping solution in those solutions? So that's kind of what's on the horizon, but lots of gas in the tank. And I think there's a lot of headspace to grow.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I was just hearing all that got me fired up, and it frankly reminded me of, I remember seeing you were named, OneRail was named Lowe's new delivery partner of the year. Was that what it was? New or innovation
Yeah,
partner.
that meant a lot.
It just, that takes me back to when we first got an award like that from Anheuser-Busch at Molo, and that was the beginning of like the super growth, right? When the market starts to recognize you for the hard work you've done, and by market I mean like the market leaders, like the companies that you aspired to work for from day one, when they start to point at you in front of everyone and say, these are the folks that are really doing it well, that's when everybody else starts to turn their heads. And these other customers that maybe weren't as responsive to your cold outreach, or maybe they were just starting to work with you but hadn't gone all in with you, start to say, well, if they're doing that well for them, how do I get some of their time invested into my business? So kudos to you and your team, because clearly you're doing something right. And hopefully you see some of that similar growth trajectory as a result of the efforts there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was emotional when that happened. I mean, it meant that much to me. They're just the best partner in terms of transparency, and this team would do anything, for any of our customers. But we're really proud, that we took a customer of their size that was not even in the same day market, and we're able to launch them, from sedan to flatbed in not, like, I don't know, it was a few months. Again, it exposed cracks. Don't think for a second it was perfect, and that's what a great partnership's all about. That, better than anybody. You got to work it. You got to work through the problems with your customers. That's, I think, one of the ways you end up getting that recognition. And things weren't perfect. Things are never going to be perfect, but it's how we work through them. That's what supply chain and logistics are all about. It's problem solving and overcoming the next problem, which is why I love this industry. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it meant a lot.
Yeah. So last question I'll ask, because I know I've kept you longer than I said I would, somewhat due to my own technological issues before we started. But I guess the audience didn't have to know about that until I just brought it up.
All good.
Legacy. When we started, I think you made a comment around the look back. Years from now, when people talk about Bill Catania, what do you want them to say about you and what you built?
Boy, that's a tough question. Well, I'll tell you what. Somebody that I have profound respect for is Fred Smith. When I had the idea, and this is no joke, this really happened. Okay. When I had the idea, and it was an idea, it wasn't, there was nothing, it was PowerPoint. I stayed up for 2 nights and I came up with OneRail when that pivot happened. When the idea, for being not the pivot in 19, but before that, when it's like, oh, this is what I got to do, but I'm doing this now and I don't have any cash. So I'll do this when it feels like it's right. So September 19, it was right. But it was before that I came up with the idea, and I sat on the idea of OneRail. I like to take the biggest swing I can. So I email Fred Smith and he responds. And it's like, oh my God, what do I do now? Fred Smith responded and he wants to hook me up with his EVP of retail. Now I'm really scared because I don't have anything. And, had a great call, and they kind of, at the time, they had FedEx Same Day City and they were kind of going down their path. This happens several times through this journey where Fred would respond. And I would say Bradley Jacobs also responds. I have profound respect for people that are that busy. Everybody said, oh, I'm busy. I'm sorry. And I do it all the time. I'm sorry. I was too busy. I didn't respond to your text. If Fred Smith can respond to my email, or Bradley Jacobs can respond to my email, and I'm absolutely nobody. There was no OneRail at that time. And at least I have a little bit of name recognition. I had no name recognition at that time. And the way that Fred is he's a beloved person within the walls of that building. If I could be half that good, I'd be happy.
And treat people that well.
It's treating people well, and it's really just continuing to evolve your business so that it's relevant. That's a founder's founder type story. And probably, again, I'm real fortunate. I've been able to bring some crazy stuff full circle. I got to meet him. I was at Goldman Sachs invited me to a innovation or Innovators and Builders Summit on the West Coast last year, and he was the keynote speaker. So you can imagine, I fangirled all over that. I stalked him, and I'm really lucky I got to meet him before he passed. And when I met him, I swear to you, if Lisa was here, he called me the email guy. I know you're the email guy. I'm like, how do you do that?
You're proud of that.
I'm beyond proud of that. It's just somebody that's done as much as he's done, can remember somebody as small as me. I hope I can do that. Half as good. I'd be happy if I could do a half as good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate you. I really enjoyed this. And I think my audience will really enjoy getting to know you a little bit better. And I'm sure you'll have some new fans and maybe some new applications. I haven't thought about that in a while, but I used to get, a lot of my guests would get applications from potential employees after they came on the show.
Cool.
Just because they like their story. And just that just sparked in my mind, because I really think your story was awesome, and I appreciate the way you think about your business and the way you think about what you're doing. I just think I wouldn't be surprised if someone saw this and was like, I kind of want to go work for that guy. So,
well, we would love that. We're always looking for great people, and we're still growing. We have a good year ahead of us, I think, in terms of growth, and there's a bunch of roles open. So if anybody's thinking about that, we'd love for you to send that resume in. Thank you, Andrew, very much. It's an honor. It's an honor to spend time with you. You have quite a story yourself, and I've been able to meet your brother a whole bunch of times, but it's good to finally meet you and connect, and it's an honor to be on your show.
Thank you. All right, friends, that's all we got for this week, and see you next time.